Hello and welcome. This is Lindsay for the Momentum Talk Show. We are here with David Thimmesch, and he is a branding strategist. And I just wanted to welcome you today, David. Would you like to say hello and wave or use your voice to say hello to the camera?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here, and thanks for having me on today.
Happy to have you. This is our second live version of the Momentum Talk Show, which has been around just over a year, a little more than a year, March of 2020. It was a download. I'll just give all of you a little bit of a background on the show. I got a download, which means I received some information and said, "You're starting a talk show." And I said, "What's it going to be called?" It said, "Momentum." And I did not know what that stood for. However, that came as well. And momentum stands for monumental opportunity manifesting extraordinary new times upon man and womankind. So it has shifted to a theme of feelings, flesh, and freedom. And we are going to be talking with David today a little bit about the concept of mindset. So, David is a branding strategist. And if you'd like to share a little bit about your superpower and what you do to begin, we'd be happy to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I encourage anybody who's interested to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love finding new connections. That's my primary source that I like connecting with people on. That's how Lindsay and I got connected. So, like she said, I'm a branding strategist and I work with life and business coaches and I help them really clarify their message and authentically connect with their clients. So, a lot of times people just really don't like that feeling of doing these kind of gross cold calls or these outreaches that don't feel authentic to who they are because they're really good at what they do. They're good at coaching people and helping them get those breakthroughs, but sometimes they're not as good at telling people what they do. And so I like helping people to get those breakthroughs, to really get their message really clear, to know who they're talking to, and to best connect with those people so that those people find you. Because my tagline is when you find your voice, your audience finds you.
Ooh, that's some real throat chakra clearing
Yeah.
here. Fantastic. And we were just discussing, thank you for sharing that, David.
Yeah, of
And we
course.
were discussing, excuse me?
Yeah, of course.
We were talking about your background in theater, and that just really makes a lot more sense now that you have this ability to bring clarity to people's message, A, what I've noticed, and a clear voice, really being able to express yourself, which in my line of work, there's a lot of fear around that, to be honest,
Mhm.
and head and heart aren't in alignment. So voice is blocked essentially. And so what do you find for people? I know we discussed talking about mindset today, but for them to be comfortable enough to share their voice or be on camera, that was something we were discussing prior.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, like we talked about, we have been in the Zoom culture. So I think to some extent, people have naturally been forced into this practice model of needing to see themselves on camera, unless you keep it off. But those of us who feel comfortable kind of or need to have that camera on, I found there's a great value in actually just feeling kind of the space around your own body as you're like on camera. That's a very stage theater kind of thing to kind of feel your presence, your stage presence around you, which is what I grew up in. And I think that sense is really important because what it does is it allows you to feel more comfortable in your own skin, to see yourself on camera. Oftentimes, one of the biggest strategies that I was taught was when you're on stage, it's good to film yourself because you might have this tick or this thing that you do that you don't even know you do until you see yourself on camera. I think what Zoom's allowed us to do is you're constantly seeing yourself speaking as you're communicating with people. I think I actually really enjoy it for that reason because when you're sitting in a room or giving a presentation, now you're actually able to look at yourself in the mirror at the same time and kind of get that presence of yourself. So it gives you better practice. So as we move off of the Zoom culture to some extent, as we start to open up and be in person again, we're more comfortable in our own bodies because we've been able to have those experiences on camera to kind of connect with people.
Yes. I'm wondering if you could clarify or maybe give an example of what it means to be aware of your body or aware of your space. I mean, I'm sitting in a chair, I'm in my living room. What would that look like?
Yeah, it has things to do with the actual physicality of like hand-eye coordination, which I think is sometimes what people actually experience. You know, if you play tennis, you're able to see, you just kind of know where your hand is and how to hit the ball. You don't actually have to watch it completely through the entire time. You just have a sense of spatial awareness.
Yeah.
As far as theater goes, it has to do with having that level of comfort between you when you know how close you should be to someone, how far away. Sometimes there's staging involved, but when there's some improv moments, just having that level of comfort. And then that translates just into the real world where, if you're at a party, for example, I feel like it's just this sense of feeling people's personal space. because everyone has a different sense of what that is. And I've stood next to people where I feel like they're really close to me and I feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so I step back and then they step toward me because that's what they're comfortable with. So they don't have a sense of spatial awareness to say, this person needs more space. And so typically I approach people with more space. And if the
Yeah.
conversation warrants, I'll slowly move closer to them. And
Mhm.
sometimes they feel more comfortable. If they step away, then I stay where I'm at to kind of be aware of that dance that you're kind of playing with people.
It
So those are
is.
just examples of that.
What's the last piece you said?
Yeah, those are just examples of different things that you experience in the real world where you have a party situation, and that kind of comes from that stage presence of being aware of your own body and how other people feel around you too.
Yeah, fantastic explanation. Thank you. And how do you think this maybe not something we didn't talk about answering? How do you think that plays out in the business world, to your benefit or to your detriment? You know, do people subconsciously are they really aware of these things, or are they completely oblivious and it matters or doesn't matter? I'm thinking actually of mirroring when you learn in business.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think whether you're on the phone or whether you're interacting with people, it is kind of matching where they're at, and it's in a natural way. It doesn't have to be like in a forced, I'm going to copycat you kind of way. It has to feel like a natural way, but you kind of match their energy level and where they're at, and you kind of feel it out.
Yeah.
When you talked about superpowers, when I kind of introduced myself, I do feel like that's something I like teaching clients as well, because
Oh,
they're working with coaching clients, and they do a great job, like I said, interacting with them and helping them. But it is kind of feeling the room, and that all comes to it has to go with feeling their emotional energy, what they're feeling at the time, what their physical energy is kind of putting out there, kind of. And that I feel like having a theater background has really helped me to read those things well, because you're always playing off each other very actively because you're on stage and you're performing in front of other people. So
mhm.
even though you're not performing in the real world, I think there is a sense of you want to be aware of how you're coming across and how people are interacting with you. So whether it be a client or whether it be a peer or however you're doing it, to make it organic and natural to you. And the big thing that I work for is being authentic. I think is so important,
Yeah.
because you need to be who you are. But at the same time, something I always point out is you will be a different person with your close intimate family than you will in an office setting. That doesn't mean that you need to be a different person. It's just you're revealing the different sides of yourself, and that can still be a persona that's authentic to you. So it's kind of discovering what authentic version of myself am I presenting to people as I interact with them.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because this concept of like hiding from yourself or having different personalities for different times has come up. And even in some of the interviews I've been doing, this idea of professionalism, and we discussed feelings. So that wasn't really the route we were going to go today. Where do you draw that line of I'm not presenting an inauthentic version of myself? And so I think for people, part of the inner work, and we will go on to self care in a moment, and mindset is really how do I present myself authentically and differentiate between professional and personal? And maybe for some people, there is no line or difference. Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I do think that there should be some line. And I think what's interesting about my interactions on LinkedIn is people are trying to figure that out. I don't think there's a
Yeah, I agree.
exact right or wrong answer, but I think people are figuring that out for themselves, because you see people on LinkedIn post, "Hey, here's a picture of me and my kid celebrating our birthday,"
Uh-huh.
and some people would say, well, that's not what LinkedIn's for. That's too personal. Other people would say, okay, that's perfect. Like that's just the right amount. Like, you're sharing something that if you have a picture of your child at the office, why would you not share a picture on LinkedIn, kind of thing, something like that. But then there's certain people where like just yesterday, I saw this video that someone filmed of themselves and they're just crying about how overwhelmed that they feel. And so some people might say, okay, I don't know if this is the right place to like publicly be sharing that. Other people are going to say that's authenticity, that's vulnerability, that's what I like to see and I'm drawn to. So I don't know what the right answer is really. I think it has to be what is right for you and what you're comfortable with.
And I agree with everything you said. And yes, the audience, yes, the situation or location or place. You're saying if LinkedIn is a place, for example,
Mhm.
or an outlet. And for
Right.
everyone, I think they are different. Instagram might be a specific place that you put your personal things, and LinkedIn is professional. And I think people are trying to figure that out. And also because we are in our homes. And so we have a lot more real things going
Yeah.
on around us. People's pets are being, shared, their personal life is being shared. And I think another concept that has come up is more of, so we've gone from the separateness and then really melding it. And then I think you and I even discussed this, like turning off work at the end of the day, and how do we switch over or do a clothing costume change, for example, to shut off work at the end of the day and differentiate the two. And then what is your message? Actually, maybe it comes down to that. Is your message share your feelings freely? Then the
Mhm.
crying video is perfect, because
Right.
that's what they're essentially doing, and that's the audience you're looking for people to feel comfortable with that. Maybe it's not, and so maybe for that person it's different. um, if you have any more to say, please share, and then I'd like to jump to mindset.
Yeah, please move forward.
Okay, great. Mindset. I'm just going to say mindset, and then I'll go on to magnetism. That'll be my talk, but you can talk about mindset.
Yeah. So with mindset, that's something we were talking about earlier today, actually, was this idea of how you make that transition between what you're believing about yourself and then how it impacts the world around you. I know I am statements have been really important to me, waking up in the morning and reading my 20 I am statements that are constantly changing. Like, I am confident, I am smart, I am capable, I am putting out content that people want to see. I'm connecting with my audience in an authentic way. I mean, just these realities that you're kind of speaking out into the world, which for me, when I first got started, felt really kind of cheesy and kind of like, oh man, this feels weird to be looking at myself in the mirror and saying these things to myself. And as I started doing them, you grow in that confidence of your mindset of recognizing you're setting yourself up with the right mindset in the morning. So for me, it's starting with these I am statements, and then I go into prayer, and I kind of get my mind right in that way, spiritually as well as mentally. And then you set yourself up for a success for the day, because as you go into these sales calls or into having these business meetings or even just posting content on, like I said, LinkedIn, you go in thinking, yeah, like I know what I'm talking about. I am confident in who I am. I've been helping people, because the strange thing about the human mind is it feels like no matter how many positive things happen, this is maybe just for me, but no matter how many things positive happen, I will wake up and be like, "Ah, but that was yesterday. I don't know if the same thing is going to happen today." Or if you had a negative maybe experience the day before, you'll just bring that with you and you'll say, "Ah, I'm assuming it's going to be." So to reset your mind every day to say it's going to be positive today, that was like a game changer for me, because otherwise I would let those negative thoughts really take over my day.
So the I am statements have helped you do that.
Yeah, those have been a huge bolster. So, I mean, that anyone like listening to this, that's a very simple way, and that you can kind of change the way you view yourself, is to write out 20 statements, whatever your greatest fears or anxieties or insecurities are, to write statements that are just truths that are counter to that, and keep telling yourself those things until you believe them. So if you say something in your head and you say, I don't believe it, you just got to keep saying it till you're like, okay, all right, I believe it. And like, you have to believe it, because otherwise your mindset's just going to be off for the whole day.
Hmm. And that's reminding me of the compliments box. And so it's like marking in history what already has happened and reminding
Mhm.
yourself, like, that did happen. It wasn't that it was, got swiped clean. What I learned about in my endotype, I'll give a little props to Laura Hulleman for creating that. For me personally, my slate is wiped clean every morning, and I need that constant reminder. So it's like what you said. It's like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, this is actually what happened. And I think it does help to write out what has happened or what you have accomplished, and keeping those compliments that maybe you have received from clients or friends or family. Or I really think it just takes one, as we grow up and as we go on. Especially, I remember graduating from college or even high school and getting, I think it was a book from my friend's parents, like, oh, the places you'll go. And remembering, like, sometimes it just takes one person to believe in you. Your parents, of course, yes, that too. And maybe
Right.
one other mentor to say, like, hey, you're really great, you can do this, or you have this talent. And when you were talking about the I am statements, I was really picturing this concept of stepping into your power, or stepping 2 feet onto that stage in confidence, like really being fully grounded in that belief, versus kind of like wavering. And that, it comes to this concept of decisiveness. are you going to decide to do this or not? Like, are you in or are you out? And I think when you're a solopreneur or entrepreneur, sometimes you are still waffling between those things. And sometimes, jobs will come up, other offers will come up, your past will come up. And it is really coming down, and maybe we'll go on to self-care of this, is, the internal confidence. And you are your biggest motivator and your worst enemy at the same time. And it really takes you setting yourself up for success in order to serve your clients. And if you can't come to a place of wholeness prior to getting on that screen or getting in front of someone, you're not really bringing your whole self there. And how much space can you hold for that person if you haven't done the self-care? So if you want to add on to mindset, I think
Right.
that would be great. And I'd like to also talk about selfish self-care.
Yeah. So I think when you talk about mindset, setting yourself up then affects the real world. So I think going into, like I said, sales, whatever you're doing, you're generally selling something. Like if you're a solopreneur, if you're a coach, you're selling yourself, you're selling a product, you're selling something. And to fully believe in what it is that you're selling, to believe in yourself, to believe in whatever it is. And so that's why I said at the beginning, like coaches are very good at what they do. They know that they can help people. They know that they have what it takes. They believe in themselves, which is like the first most important thing to get to that point. But where I see them struggle is they struggle making the connect between what they do and the success they can bring, and then connecting it to actually convincing people, not even convincing people, just really telling people that I can help you, and allowing them to make that natural connection to them. And I think that people struggle to make that connection because either they're not clearly communicating what the value is that they bring, or the person that they're talking to isn't understanding that value in some way, and there's some disconnect. So it's about making things as clear and simple as possible, and then making sure that you're continually speaking with the people you want to connect with. Because as you talk about mindset, it's if you know that you can help somebody, and you know that what you're telling them is going to work, that's going to set you up for having more authentic conversations that are really going to help.
Yeah. And may I share what's coming up for me as you say that?
Yeah, of course.
Um, putting like So an intuitive healing, for example, or the kind of work that I do, it's not necessarily it's a feeling, is a clearing of roadblocks. Ooh, listen to my throat chakra just get blocked right there. How do you put words on that, And so it's writing, maybe it's testimonials, or how are you maybe measuring the success or the, internal personal change? Maybe someone's been stuck in a cycle or a loop for 20 years, and
Hmm.
they're continuing to have these same recurring situations in their life that they can't get past, but they don't know why. And then you help solve that, and it frees up something that feels so slight, but it's huge, right? And then all of a sudden they can
Right.
move past this thing. How do you put that into words? You know, that's a
Yeah.
hard thing, I think, for people.
And so I do think that something that is a superpower of mine that I like to do is I take a lot of information. I sit down and
Okay.
talk to someone for an hour,
Mm.
and then they'll just talk and talk and talk. I'll ask them questions. So you'll get this information. And I say, so what you're saying is you do this, and then I just break it down into one sentence, and they're like, yeah, that's what I do. And I'm like, that's what you need to tell people, because you don't get an hour with people. You get like 5 seconds if you're
Yeah,
lucky. That's
exactly.
why you
And
have an elevator pitch, because people's attention spans are so short nowadays that you need to capture it right away. And so if you get someone, they say, so, Lindsay, what do you do? You can say, I do da 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 for da 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 da. Oh my gosh, that's what I need. Or I know somebody who needs that. Or tell me more. Or do you have a business card? How can I find out more? So if you're able to clarify that message in a simple way, that's what's going to make the difference for your business, because
mm,
people want to work with you. They just don't know it yet. And that's about mindset too, is this reality that you need to communicate the confidence that you have about your business. And you carry the confidence. So for example, Lindsay, like you carry it. It's sometimes communicating that might be the block for you. But that's not because you don't know what you're doing. It just means people need very quick explanation, because they're not like, they don't have the time for you to fully sit down and say, so I do this and I do that, and then I'm going to do this. Oh, we're going to walk you through this whole
yeah,
thing.
that's
They don't have
confusing.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
but if you
Yeah.
sat down in an intro call, once they know that they want to work with you, then you can take the time on the onboarding call, or however your process is, to say, now I can speak to you in the way that's authentic. Now I can tell you more about the details of what I do. But it's about getting that attention, and that's part of sales. But I think that's also just part of the clear communication that's so important.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of magnetism, but I'm also thinking of this authenticity piece as well.
Yeah.
Because I think you draw in the people that will best be served by you when you bring your authentic self to the table. And this kind of goes
Absolutely.
back to that. Excuse me?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're totally right. You hit the nail on the head because the reality is if the worst thing you can do is try to be somebody you think people want you to be, right? That's just I know that sounds like such a simple thing and like when you're a kid you're like, no, be yourself. But I think as we grow older, we actually feel more and more pressure to be somebody that we're supposed to be. I think culture and society puts those expectations on. I think on our first call we talked about maybe expectations around masculinity or what it means to be a man, and so it kind of
Yeah.
takes you off your expectations of who you want to be. But I think that can happen with your business too, because when you launch your business, you're like, oh, I'm really passionate. I want to do this, this, and this, and then suddenly you're hit with like all these different coaches and seminars and mindset people and all these different ideas, and you have like, oh, I'm supposed to be this, I'm supposed to work on that, and I got to work on these things, and I got to make sure I have that, and you're so confused by so much information, and your own clarity on your own vision gets lost. And so
Oh,
that's why to have that one sentence is so important.
yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of this concept of um coming home to yourself, this rediscovery of what's always been there. So I
Hmm.
was talking with a friend of mine the other day, another coach, about this concept of transformation, and I said, well, actually um it really is coming, it's a rediscover. So when the work that I do, it's removing layer only to discover what's beneath it all, which was always there from when we were born. And I've had different people say different things. So I work with Dr. Amba doing medical qigong, and essentially she talks about these emotions that we were born with as a baby. And so when we go through life, we have situations that teach us otherwise, or we get taught from the world that it's not okay to cry, or it's not okay to talk. We'll go back to our concept, not okay to talk about feelings amongst friends or professionally or XYZ. And so we start acting that way even though we don't want to. And so that's this rediscovery of self. And so I'm curious, when you talked about getting lost in all these things as an entrepreneur and then remembering what your statement is, what comes up for me at that time is actually going back to their authentic self and realizing what is our message and what is true to them, minus all this information that's been kind of shot at them in a way. It kind of feels overwhelming. um, yeah, so I'm curious, when you work with people, if they're having trouble actually deciding what it is that they do, if they're having trouble deciding who their clients are, what kind of questions you ask, or what kind of work. I can answer the question for myself, but I'm not sure if your way of doing things is a little bit different about the rediscovery of where they really want to be and where they want to go. And it's sometimes very personal.
Yeah, it is. And I think some people, everyone's different. So some people don't require much prompting. I'll sit down with them and say, tell me about yourself. And then they'll just talk for an hour straight. And other people will need specific prompts along the way because they're just different. Like everyone's different,
Yeah.
and so they're just different in the way that they communicate. So I have to keep asking specific questions. Well, tell me more about that. When you were talking, you said something about this. Could you explain what that means to you? And just kind of, it's about being intuitive enough to kind of recognize the important things. I just worked with a client last week. Very easy. She just talked and talked and just told me like her whole life story.
Oh,
I took notes. I watched the recording back because I asked her if I could record it, and we had a Zoom call.
nice.
And then I put together this 35-second manifesto for her where I captured her key points, what she was doing, and where she was going. And she was like, yes. Like I set it to music. I recorded my own voice. I created this whole thing for her. And she was like, this captures this is like my tone. This is my message. This is what I want people to feel. And she just feels like that created this direction of tone for her. Where now moving forward, she knows I need to reference this because this is who I am. And you were able to communicate in a way that I was I knew was somewhere in my head, but I couldn't get it down on paper.
So, in the mind of David Thimmesch, what is going through your head? If you want to share, you don't have to share. This may be a creative circle internal conversation for how the brain works. How are you deciphering that? Do you see it like all these little things and you just pick out like, oh, I heard this word, this word, this word. I'm going to put that down. That's going to win on the hangman, sentence. Or is it more, you added music in here. So this is a completely
Hmm.
different element. So to me, that sets like a tone for
Yeah.
the vibe or the ambiance or the environment that the client is wanting to feel or what they're wanting to evoke in that person. I'm not sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think what the process is looking for key phrases that they, without them knowing, their body language changes. they seem excited about it. They say this thing that just seems so natural and organic to them, and you don't tell them, you don't point it out because you don't want to blow it, but they're kind of excited about something, and so you just take note of it, you write it down, and you just keep listening.
Mm.
um, or you just kind of ask the right kind of question, say, hey, when you said this, could you just dive a little bit more? And they're like, oh yeah, they just brushed over it, but that's like what in my opinion is now something you seem to get a spark. And you
Yeah.
go back, you dive deeper and deeper until you feel like you found something, you're like, that's the core. And you don't reveal anything in the conversation because you don't want to throw off their track. You don't want to say, that's it, you did it, that's what it is, and they're like, what? And so you just want to get as much organic, natural them talking as possible. And then the music is so
Doing all
important,
your
like,
techniques. It's just
I know, but it's something that like I could explain that to you and tell you that, but it is kind of one of those things where, um, not to say, but like I think that is a superpower from the standpoint of not everyone is able to do that for themselves. Not everyone is able to find that for someone else even, and so I think to have an outside source to kind of just talk with you and help you discover and pull those things out. I mean, that's what coaching is about. That's what therapy is about in general, is helping you identify things that you need help with.
yeah, yeah. So it's almost like you see through any facade, for example, or I never know how to say that word correctly. I
Facade,
call
yeah.
it that. Excuse me.
Facade.
Thank you. I'm not going to try to repeat. The masks. So it seems like you see the authenticity as it comes across like a spark, for example, and it almost seems not challenging to decipher, but it's a split second moment. It could be
Yeah.
really fast, and they may gloss over it because
That's
it
why you
comes.
got to you got to record it, because you don't want to miss it. Because exactly right. Because if you go back and be like, okay, they said that, I want to make sure I get it just right.
Yeah.
Because then you bring in you're using the words that they're using too,
Mhm.
and then you're putting that into a manifesto that says we're going to do this, this, this. This is what I'm all about, and then you wrap it all up into a tagline that really captures what they're all about, and then you simplify. It's all about simplifying it, because I think the hardest thing to do is to take like this amount of information
Yeah.
and get it down to like something small that people can feel they can wrap their minds around. But when
Yeah.
you identify what that is for your coaching business, it just empowers you. It empowers you to know that's who I am. Like that's my personality. That's what I'm about. And then the music piece, like you talked about, that's a whole nother element. And that part is me feeling the vibe of, so I can get the words right, but it's the vibe is really what the music captures.
Oh,
So the person last week, it's like a slight hard rock, kind of this smooth rock kind of feel to it, because it's very just like, yeah, like you can do it. Like, yeah, it's just very like intense, but it's not like heavy metal rock. It's just kind of this like this light rock that kind of pushes it, because for this person, they do a lot of mindset coaching, and they're very like hard as nails, but like heart of gold person. And so how do you capture that balance between like, I'm tough and I'm going to teach you, but I'm also really care. And
yeah,
so it's finding the right music that captures that tone too.
that's huge. Yeah, that actually really opens up a lot of things in my mind because when I do work with people, I guess there's a cadence to things now that I think about it. It's very visual for me. So I can visualize what they're doing and the roadblocks and try to make connections. And so we're really clearing up why they're having a dilemma, for example. So the current dilemma, what's going on? I need to make this choice. I'm at this choice point in life, or this pattern, excuse me, keeps showing up for me. May I share?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the last piece is that it will come as a visual. And I use butterfly, for example, a lot of this color blue, or it's a clock, or whatever it is. And this is actually a representation of something where their path is leading, but there's something stop, like continuing to come back. And it's generally an internal thing, self-worth,
Mhm.
self-love. Am I worthy of having everything that I ever dreamed of? Like, can I have the personal life and the professional life? Can I have my family and my dreams? Is that possible? Do I value myself enough to deserve that? But why? You can't just say like, oh, value yourself, yay, okay, we believe in ourselves. I feel that way. No, it's not that. There's usually something from a long time ago, and it's generally past trauma or childhood things that come up. And so when you're speaking about what you do, it's reminding me of what I do in a very, like we talked about earlier, like you're very tangible, you're direct, you have the words for it, and I'm kind of like, ooh, like this is what's going on, this is the feeling behind it, why are you
Right.
feeling that way? And so I think when you deal with trauma, coming into a really safe space is kind of that way, because it's the idea of creating a level of comfort for someone to share what's going on, because it can be really, really vulnerable for them to do that. And sometimes when we get past that, then they can get their message, even though they've always known it. It's just that there's
Absolutely.
something, it's like stepping on your own feet, essentially, getting in your own way.
Definitely.
I've
And
even
then
had
the
one
best
that,
thing you can do is get out of your own way, because if you're your own worst enemy, like it's gonna be tough to deal with, because you're just gonna constantly be tripping over yourself.
yes, and actually I've had it where it was like the visual I got was fishing line. Like it's so clear and so small, and it actually wasn't them. It was someone else tripping them up
Hmm.
secretly. And so sometimes you tell people like, "Oh, just get out of your own way," but it's not that easy. They can be getting out of their own way for 20 years, and it's not them. It's something external at times, or something from childhood that I found. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes the work that I do comes prior or parallel to yours.
Yeah. Well, you have to get through your personal blocks, of course, too, because your personal and professional life are going to be tied together, especially if you are a solopreneur or you're doing coaching, because you are the business. And so it's so important to make sure that you don't have any personal things that are holding you back from professional success as well.
Yes, and that comes to the selfishness of self-care. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think we talked about this right before the call, where it was this sense that people have this mindset around thinking that self care is really selfish.
Mhm.
They feel bad about it. And almost for people who promote it, they're almost saying, like, yeah, it's selfish, but like it's important and you should do it. Like, that's almost the mindset I see, as opposed to this thinking of like, no, the reality is if you do self care, that's actually not a selfish thing, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. It's like being on an airplane, right? When the masks fall, and you're like, make sure you put it on yourself first before you assist, your child. And your instinct might be to say, oh, I got to go help this person. But
Yep.
in the midst of doing that, then you might pass out. And so that's just the reality of self care, where if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not taking time to rest and reflect and do activities that you enjoy and filling yourself, you're not going to be able to pour out and help other people. And I see this a lot with coaches, unfortunately, is the sense that they do care so deeply for other people. They're pouring so much into them, but they sometimes don't take the time to say, how am I being filled? Like professionally, personally, in different ways in my life, relationally. And so they get burned out.
Yes, we discussed this the other day actually with someone else. And I think we talked about the concept of like dive in, head first and then take 6 months off because you're sick, physically ill, or slow and steady wins the race. It's the tortoise example. I think
Yeah.
of it twofold actually, in response to what you said. One is you are the example of what you're trying to teach people. Live
Mhm.
it,
Right.
prove it. And the other piece, what I notice is, so we did a few breaths before we started the call, for example, today. What place are you coming from, and from that place what types of decisions are you making, and what kind of presence are you bringing to the moment? So if you and
Mm.
I went around and did like 50 things and came frazzled, like, hey, we're here, okay, ready for the meeting, and then we're like completely out of our bodies acting like we're nuts, and then it's like, wait a minute. So if you come fully present, we're going to have a totally different conversation. And I think in your personal life and in your business life, you're going to make different decisions. Instead of saying, yes, 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 you're going to say, wait, actually, this is the best decision for me. And you will, in the long run, save time
Yep.
and energy. But it may look selfish, for example, because you only took 3 appointments that day versus 16, but who's running around with the chicken, like a
Yeah.
chicken with their head cut off?
Yeah, it's taking the time to set yourself up right. One of my favorite quotes is that I need to do better following is from Martin Luther, and he said, "I have so much to do today, I can't possibly like not pray for 3 hours this morning." And so
Oh,
it's this
cute.
mindset of this idea of saying, rather than saying I don't have time to do this, it's like I couldn't possibly get everything done I need to if I didn't take this amount of time to do it. And I think that that is a whole paradigm shift, which is something that alters your perspective, and something that I still struggle with. I know, like I wake up and if I'm like, oh man, I got so much to do, like I just need to like quick grab a banana and some coffee and just dive right into it. And if I don't take the time to do all those things that I said, I feel the difference throughout the day. Like there is a difference in my mindset, in my life. By the end of the day, I feel just a little bit more exhausted, a little bit more. But on the days that I set myself up right, I have energy to keep going past, 5, 6, 7 o'clock. And so it is filling your tank up in the morning is so important, where you get more energy and more productivity.
I would agree. That reminds me of visualization. If you took that 3 hours, for example, or whatever number of time in the morning, I like to visualize me strategically doing the things with ease and grace and swiftness, um, from thing to thing. And I think that actually helps with manifestation and intention writing. What do we say? With ease and grace, and only the highest good be done. And so it's like, or something better we write at the end of ours. And so you think about this idea of everything has to be so hard in life and I have to trudge through it. It's like, why can't all those decisions just come really naturally and easily? And I think that relates to upper limiting. It's like, oh, what? It's done. Okay, great. Now what? And then people get confused because it was too easy.
Right.
The interactions or the
Easy.
connections or getting a client or whatever it may be. I think they get a little bit thrown off by how easy it could be and the extra time and energy that they have because it was so natural. And I think this also relates to this fluidity between professional and personal that we're all really navigating. And that was a really like personal goal for me for a long time, was to not have such a stark difference between the two. And now the flip side of differentiating, hey, you need to take some time off because you are an entrepreneur. And how do you do that? Healthfully. You and I discussed this for a period of time. And why is that so important, especially in your line of work, to not get exhausted and not have everything be work?
Because you got to be filled, right? Especially
Oh,
when you have a kind of position where you are pouring into other people. Lindsay, like the kind of even work that you do, where you're pouring into other people, you're helping them discover things, you're helping them grow. So you understand that if you're not being filled, then you're not going to have that energy to give to someone else. And just like anybody who does a coach, or anybody who does any kind of work, if you're a mother, if you are a father, if you are just whatever, anything that you do, if you want to pour into somebody else, you need to be poured into. And that talks about the self-care and how that actually plays into the way that you look about your life. So I think that's so important that people frankly just overlook because they don't see the complete value in it.
yeah. Hmm. I'm thinking of the getting sick piece. I also think it takes, or I guess for you, a question for you could be like, what do you think it would take for people to change their mindset around that, besides getting sick? Like on another note, like
Hmm.
seeing others living it out, or
I think there's always resistance to change. And so when there's a resistance to change, the only way to break through it is that the thing that you're not getting, the pain from what you're not getting has to be greater than the pain of changing.
yeah,
And so it is kind of overcoming that. So you talked about being sick, that would be like, okay, that's greater pain. Now it would have
yeah.
been less pain to change.
Hmm.
I think everything is going to be different, and it could be a mentality, it could be a mindset. For me, it was recognizing things that were holding me back professionally, that I was like, I could be successful if I made these changes. And then I made the changes and I saw success. And so the idea being that when you make the mindset shift, there has to be a catalyst. So for me, it was getting a business coach to help me recognize my own shortcomings. Because I always say you could be the best barber in the world, but it's hard to cut your own hair in the mirror. And so that's generally what people kind of express with whatever business they're doing. Even the best coaches need the best coaches, because you need somebody to help get that perspective on what you're doing and how you're working. Personal trainers get other personal trainers. Just like you look for the best people who can help you to do what you do best. And that's what I like doing for other people, because they're successfully coaching their clients, and I kind of help them to say, hey, like, let's take a look at your messaging, at your communication, at your client base. Are we setting the benchmarks the right way? Are we communicating this clearly? Are they feeling like you're getting the value from them? And just making sure that everything makes sense.
Thank you for sharing. Is there something you'd like to share around what message you received that helped you move forward? And then I have something else to share. You don't have to share. It's just an offer.
Yeah. Um,
Like, was it so simple and you're like, oh yeah, or were you just resisting it and you already knew?
yeah, I think it was like a blinding flash of the obvious, somewhat, where I don't think I was consciously aware of some of these things. I think they just kind of all culminated where I realized what I enjoy doing, the people that are being drawn to me, the people that I best connect with, all started lining up and it all started making sense. And then success started coming quickly after that, because I realized that I was kind of not intentionally resisting, but I think subconsciously resisting a path that was really well lined up for me. And so the best way to break through that, because sometimes it is subconscious and you're not trying to intentionally resist it, you're just, sometimes you are, sometimes you know what you need to do and you're just like, no, I'm going to be stubborn and resist it. But other times you're not even aware, you don't know what you don't know. And so that's why I said having coaches is so important, because that was my
Yeah.
breakthrough, right? Was getting outside perspectives, talking to different people, and then suddenly it was just like a click, like a light bulb moment for me. And
Mm.
it's different for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's two things when you share that. Thank you for sharing. Is that one is that no matter how successful you are or you think you are, or how far you are in your career, I'm not a beginner, so I don't need a coach. We all need a coach forever, someone to
Yeah.
support us. I really think that's what you're hitting home there. And you're also stating, in addition to that piece, I'm not on to number two yet, is that really successful people can be coached, and you can be their coach. For example, it doesn't have to be, someone that I don't know how to explain that. Like, I think that also speaks to coaches to say, it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter what part of your career you're in. You can still get help from David, for example, or myself, for example. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
And I think for us to remind ourselves of that is whatever stage we're in, it's not like you graduate fully. You may graduate from that coach onto another one, for example, and may need a different type of guidance or help. And I really think it's a piece of accountability as well, and getting a third party perspective or a third person perspective. The other piece is what I wanted to eventually talk about, and now we've segued into it, is magnetism. You said you had
Hmm.
a natural, like people were that are drawn to you naturally. And it reminds me of the self-care and the mindset creating magnetism. And so not denying this natural connection that you have with people. And that kind of is what happened with me. I'm curious if you'd like to share any parts of that. You can be vague if you'd like, about this natural draw of people to you.
Yeah. I'd be curious to kind of have you set it up actually, just to kind of get some of your thoughts on it, because I know that was the word that came to mind. And so I was curious why that word came to mind when we were talking.
Magnetism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that when you are fully, so when you have this mask on and you try to be someone you're not, you hit those blocks, for example. And I can't say that I'm fully there either. I really think it takes the inner work and the self-care and the getting past a lot of old trauma and cleansing and clearing things. But once you do that, and you're not hiding from yourself, you're not running away from who you truly are, because that can be the fear why you don't bring your full self to the table, especially professionally. Is that people are just drawn to you, and that's the
Mhm.
idea, is that you have this magnetism that like cannot be denied. And so it's almost like you can't deny it's like literally knocking on your door. I actually have dreams quite often, or I wake up in the middle of the night and I hear knocks on my front door. I'm not really sure who that is yet, but I think they're waiting. And a lot of times it
Mhm.
goes back to the getting out of your own way. And so it's like, hey, if I'm bringing my full self to the table, the one that I really want to be, and for me, sometimes the things that I want to talk about are pretty taboo and they're not being talked about, but I think there's a lot of people that want to talk about them. And so when I get out there and have the confidence to talk about these things, I think the people will be right there waiting. And so the magnetism it's kind of like this coach must have said to you, it's undeniable.
Mhm.
So,
Magnetism is a great way to put it, because there's attraction for magnetism, but there's also repelling for
ooh, go on
magnetism,
to
right?
that. Yeah.
So that's what it is about clarifying your message too when I work with my clients. So I like this idea of magnetism that you're talking about, because people are so scared to put out a message that's authentic and real and potentially controversial, potentially, because they're afraid, well, I don't want to push people away, right? I don't want people to not want to work with me and say, well, this person's definitely not for me.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's exactly what you want. Because if you're not standing for something, then you're standing for nothing. If you're
Totally.
saying, I'm everything to everyone, then you're nothing to anyone. And so, Lindsay, like you're saying, you're like, these are the things I want to talk about. I want to talk about
I'm
things
not
that
talking
maybe,
about them quite yet.
right, you haven't, but like just talking about, you're gearing up to talk about these things that that you feel in your heart, in your soul, is like, these are things I want to talk about.
Mhm.
But as you know, I don't need to tell you this, like they will be repelling to some people who will then flee from you, because they'll say, nope, I don't want anything to do with that. But there will be people that will be running toward you, because they'll
Yeah.
be like, that is exactly who I want to talk to and want to work with.
Yeah.
And so those are the people you want to work with anyway. You don't want to work with the people who would run away from who you really are. And
Right.
so that's the thing about finding your message. When I say, when you find your voice, your audience finds you, that whole
Mhm.
idea of saying that is so clear, because when you start putting out into the world who you are, who you want to work with, what you're all about, the right people will see that message and they'll be drawn and say, I want to find out more about what you're offering. And the more clear you can be on who you are, the more clear it's going to be that they want to work with you. Because if you don't do that, then everyone's going to be like, you're just kind of blah in the middle.
You
And
are.
that's what people don't want to be, because they think, I want everyone to work with me. That's what most people start off thinking. They're
Mhm.
like, I don't want to repel anyone. I want to work with everyone. But if you have that mentality, then nobody will really feel super drawn to you either.
All of that, and that's decisiveness. Would you like to share more?
No, please continue.
Fear. There's totally a fear of rejection. I want to be everything to everyone. And then you realize what I realized in my life and working on it is like, I can do 15,000 backflips and bend in all different type of ways to serve platters of whatever type of food people are wanting. But you can't after a while because you get exhausted. And
Right.
then you go to the self-care piece. Sometimes I really think there's a pendulum, and it has to do with boundaries. It has to do with overgiving. It has to do with learning how to receive. That one takes a long time. And
Hmm.
for me, mine all started several years ago from a business coach that said, Lindsay, your goal this month or this week is to say no. I could not put my pen on the paper. I had so much resistance. I was like, I can't even write that down.
Mm.
Nope, I can't do it. I'm not going to say no. And it took me a year to work on that. And after that year, I worked on receiving.
Yeah.
That was hard. And then it comes to the next piece of like, then it's the letting go and like releasing more things. So, wow, I think we've come full circle. That was a really cool one.
Yeah.
Would you like to share anything else? No, I'm all giddy and happy we
No,
could
yeah. I
have fun.
definitely feel like the biggest message from anyone watching this is to make sure that you know who you are,
Mhm.
to clarify that and make it as succinct as possible into one sentence if possible. And this goes for your personal life. You could have your own personal mantra or your business. Those could be slightly different or the same,
Mhm.
depending on what kind of business you have. And then making sure that you tell the world about it. And you're going to
Yeah.
attract the right people, that they're going to find you and be attracted to you because of what you put out there. And that's what I found is subconsciously was resisting for a long time, which was when I would be on LinkedIn, when I would post content, when I would connect with people, it was generally people who did coaching and consulting who were drawn to me personally and wanted to work with me personally. And before I recognized that, I just thought, oh, it's so great. I love connecting with these people. It's great. And then I saw this opportunity to say, like, these are actually my people. Like, these are the people I want to work with. These are the people that enjoy what I have to say. And so I think being aware of that for whatever you're defining, being willing to recognize you could go in with one idea and always be willing to change it as you go and
Mhm.
say, okay, this is who I'm learning to be through the people that are naturally being attracted to me. Like Lindsay, I know you talked about, I'm not working with men. I'm not going to do that. I'm totally just not interested. And then you found, wait a second, this is actually a big interest, and people are being drawn to this interest that I have. And so you were willing to shift your own perspective on things. And that's what I learned too, is just shift my perspective. So always being willing to learn and grow, and done beats perfect. So put yourself out there and then just start learning and growing as you go.
You did talk about that. Maybe that's another talk for us at some point. Is this I think we'll have a whole nother talk on
Yeah.
working with the opposite sex. That's a whole nother thing.
Right.
Speaking of, we have I think Jance Trevor is out there who has also been interviewed for these concepts. I think he's the only one out there, so I think he might be the winner of. I'm just gonna check on one more thing. Sorry for the background noise here. Um, I actually, while I look this up, I'm curious about what you said. Like you're saying, if I may just reflect back, is you may have an idea of what you want, and you're also gathering information based on who's already naturally drawn to you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because I think sometimes you think you know who you are and who is going to like you, and then
Yeah.
you go out there and then it could be completely different. And so being willing to adjust, right? And being like, oh, like even specifically saying I'm not going to work with these people, and then finding out those people are clamoring to work with you. And just if you're open to it, to be willing to say these are my people. These people need to hear what I have to say, and there's something about what I'm saying that's being drawn to them.
Right. Okay. Do you know Bethany Raslager?
I'm not sure. I think I do.
Okay. just a second. I'm doing my own little old school drawing. Are you checking Facebook? Hi from Trevor Green.
Yeah.
Oh, brought the Texas heat. Thanks, Jance. Hi, Bethany. He said he brought the Texas heat to Green Bay, and that's exactly what's going on. It's going to be 90 this weekend here.
Yeah.
By the way, David and I are live from Madison and Verona.
Yep.
Is that right? Okay. Okay. So it is Jans. Congratulations. You won a free session with me. I will contact you. Cool. I know him vaguely. Okay. So anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? This was very fun.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk forever, but nothing that I want to introduce because then we'll just keep going for another hour.
Exactly. Sounds good. Till next time. Thank you all for being here. David and
Thank you,
Lindsay.
guys.
Thank you.